some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles. Got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the team WSN.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Sit-Down Morning Show with Malik Wright, presented by the Right Way Sports Network. I'm your host, Malik Wright, joined by my co-hosts on the 1 to 2 today, Daniel Almeida. Got a jam-packed show, a lot of stuff to get into. But before we do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Danny, I want to start in Houston. I want to start in the AFC South. There are folks out there that believe CJ Stroud might be regressing a little bit. And we got to get to it, man. We got to have this conversation. I believe that the sophomore slump is a real thing. I think, though, we also have to give him a little bit of grace, too, because I think that, I think that when you look at it, you have to come at it from a perspective that he had such a stellar rookie season that maybe the expectations were set so high for him. And, this were some of my thoughts during the summer when he rolled out the podcast and Micah Parsons, the whole 9 yards and all that. I wanted to make sure that he was still focused on ball, because sometimes you can get too big for your bridges. And especially for a team like Houston that has all the talent in the world, have a new head coach, they seem like they're ready to make a push for this thing, right? You got to ask yourself this question: is CJ Stroud mentally in the right place to lead the Texans right this year? Or did he put too much pressure on himself going into the season? Dan, I know you were a big believer of CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans going into the year. And listen, their record is still positive, right? They're still in a situation where they're going to make the playoffs, and they can do some good things. But I think that the expectation was just that they would take the next step. Really curious to hear your thoughts, though.
Yeah, I think that first off, I'm gonna be honest, right? And I'm excited to be on the show. I'm excited to talk about all the sports today. There's a chance they miss the playoffs, Malik. There is, and obviously right now they're 7-5, 2 games ahead of the Colts. But when you look at their schedule versus the Colts have a real chance to upset them. Obviously, it's a long shot. It's like 10 to 15%, but they still face the Houston Texans, and the Houston Texans still have a couple tough games, while the Colts, on the other hand, have a couple much easier games, I would say, against the Patriots, against the toughest game is against the Dolphins. But the Houston Texans, what concerns me, isn't about making the playoffs. It's about what they can do against these great teams, because they're a team that just look lethargic. And I think a lot of it does have to do with the fact that they've been without Nico Collins for a little portion of the season. They've been without Stephon Diggs, for the rest of the season now. Tank Dell hasn't stepped up. And I feel like he has hit a sophomore slump. And I feel like CJ Stroud, I'll say it myself, I put too much on him, right? I kind of put him on the pedestal, without letting him fully develop as an NFL quarterback. And I think that's where we have to be slower. And this was, my thought process. We have to be slower to crown these guys, right? He had a very good season. He had an excellent season, but we have to see sustained success at the NFL level. We have to see sustained success from an offense in general, right? We were all crowning Bobby Slowick, saying Bobby Slowick is the next this, is the next that. But the issue with this team has also been the offensive line play has been putrid. And last year, that was the thing. It was like, holy shit, how are they making it work with this terrible offensive line? Is it the scheme? Is it the checks? Is it having the tight end come in a block? How are they getting these, bottom 5 offensive linemen to look great? And I think that they just were on a magical run last year. And I think that they're still a very good team, but they're a team that hasn't looked dominant, right? Obviously, we're going to get to our Joe Mixon topic in a little bit. Joe Mixon has also not looked like a top 5 running back. The thing with Joe Mixon, the reason why he's having a lot of success with them too, is first off, he's getting the ball a ton. He's averaging 15 to 20 carries a game. So it's simply the fact that you're putting the ball in Mixon's hands is boosting up his yardage. You're getting him in these goal line situations, but this offense just hasn't looked fluid all season, right? CJ Stroud has looked jumbled in the pocket. He's looked like he has happy feet in the pocket. And this is part of the growing pains of having a young quarterback. So when I look at the Texans, I think we were far too early crowning them to say, hey, this team is of the upper echelon of teams. I think that they're a fine team. I think that they're a good team, but they're not a superstar team. They're not that next dark horse team to make the Super Bowl yet. They're not on the tier of the Ravens, of the Buffalo Bills, of the Kansas City Chiefs. They're just not there yet, Malik. And I think that this is a team that has to go through the rough patches with their injuries. And I think that CJ Stroud has to go through these rough patches. So I think that he'll be fine, and I think that he will turn it around. But we were definitely too quick to crown this dude as the next top 5 quarterback. I think, well, maybe not you, but the entire media, I would say there was a large sentiment, I mean, myself included, that was saying that this team, was a surefire playoff team. They're likely going to make the playoffs. They're a surefire 10+ win team, and they're a surefire team that's going to potentially be that next team to push for the Super Bowl. But I think that they got to get healthy, and it really is going to be a testament to say, hey, CJ Stroud, how well can he work outside of the structure of his offense? Because the structure of the offense isn't looking good right now. And Malik, they just lost a divisional game to Will Levis and the Titans.
I think that when you look at it, there was a comment made from West Hude, our guy. He says, just one game, don't chastise him too much. I think it's been more than one game. Let's start there. I think that when you come out and you put yourself on a level of some of these upper echelon quarterbacks, people tend to grade you such as that, right? CJ Stroud spoke so highly of himself, as you should, of course. But when you look at the results, 14 touchdowns, 9 interceptions this season, has had a couple of games where he has not even passed for 200 yards this season. One game where he passed for 86 yards. It's been bad at spots. It's been bad at spots for CJ Stroud this year. And that's why I kind of started the show by saying, hey, maybe just focusing a little bit more in on ball might be the best course of action for him if he's going to be able to take the team to the next level. I think that they've surrounded him with a lot of talent. And albeit he has some of his receivers in that lineup, they lost Stephon Diggs for the season. But you think that if your quarterback is elite in putting himself in the top 5 as he did after year 1, you'd expect him to really uplift, be able to uplift the talent that is around him. And we just haven't really seen that, Daniel.
Yeah, and to address Sean's question, we're not bailing on CJ Stroud. We're just saying that this is the growing pains, and I think that that's where my thought process and my analysis with this goes is Stroud is a good quarterback, and the expectation that was put upon him, for right or for wrong, is this dude is going to be an MVP candidate. That was the expectation, and that's kind of what we're going off of here. Is we're not saying this dude is a trash quarterback, but we're going off of the expectation that was put on CJ Stroud, and that's what we're trying to. This whole conversation is how can we, improve not only, the quality of, us talking sports, but to understand this, and the understanding and the portion that I learned from this is it's okay to not crown a CJ Stroud early on in his NFL career. That's something, same thing with Bryce Young. It's okay to not put him in a box that this is what he's going to be for the rest of his career.
It's okay to let guys grow.
Yes.
In a league that's starving for the next star always, right? We're always looking to uplift the next star always. It's okay to let these guys grow, man. It's okay to let these guys grow into their own. That's fine. That's fine to do. No one is judging that, right? But we got to stop with this guy is going to be better than this guy. And you know what I mean? It's so short-sighted thinking, I believe, man.
Yeah.
And that's just my thoughts on CJ Stroud. That's why I was as bullish as I was in the offseason and as bullish as I am now. Let them grow as players. Let's stop trying to crown these people. I think everybody's so envious of having that hot take, if you will. For me on the show, I'll tell you what, man. I say what I believe. I never say, if you guys ever hear me say something out of my mouth, it's genuinely because I believe it. Genuinely, because it's not to stir up ratings. It's not for people to tune in more. Whether we get 50 people watching every single day, or we get 120, or we get 200 or 300 as we've had before, it's not about that. I do this because I say what I believe on the show. If I think that a guy is being crowned too early, I'll say it. And I think CJ Stroud was crowned way too early for a guy that has so much more to achieve in our sport.
Yeah, no, and that's where I think for me, the hard part looking at it is the NFL it really is about availability. And I think that's where for me, I was really looking at it saying, hey, I struggled to see how with Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, who all three guys I was extremely high on,
Mhm.
how they could look worse than they did last year. And I think that that's where my thought process was. And uh, it's something you got to like, I'm learning from and saying, hey, okay, well, what's the depth behind those guys? The NFL is not all, peaches and sunshine. It's not all, clean slate of health. And CJ Stroud is a quarterback where it's shown so far this year where, hey, when he's got those guys on the field, when Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs early on in the season, this offense was humming.
Mhm.
And the same thing, the game that we saw, CJ Stroud not throw the ball a ton, they were running the ball a ton, and they had a huge success with Joe Mixon. But it's the same thing we'll discuss in our overreactions. Like, it's a long football season, and it is 17 weeks. Same thing with Jaden Daniels. These quarterbacks and these guys, you have to put together a lengthy stretch of not week to week superstar success, but just consistency.
Mhm.
And we got to see that with CJ Stroud. And same thing, my thought process here is I just need to see them make the playoffs first, because it's not a given that they're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what takes place. We appreciate you guys joining in the conversation. We're going to have our guy Parker Blake joining us here shortly on the show. But before we bring Parker in, make sure you guys do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or upload content from the TWSN studios. Without further ado, for the first time in about 2 weeks, we got our guy Parker Blake joining us back on the show. Park, what's going on, my man?
Hey, man, happy to be back. How you guys doing this morning?
Good, man. I'm doing
been a
good. I'm
while.
doing good. It's been a while, brother. It
Yes.
doesn't feel right not talking ball with you, man.
No, I've been missing it, man. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I had to bring you in for the topic that I know you love talking about every chance you get. The future of Aaron Rodgers. There's been some real conversations recently about the future of Aaron Rodgers. Been some mixed reports out there. There were reports saying that, hey, he doesn't want to play for the Jets organization. Then there's reports saying, no, him and Woody Johnson are in a great place. They just had dinner with one another. What's next? What's next? What's next for Aaron Rodgers and the New York Football Jets? Let me just start off by saying this, Parker. It brings up such a greater conversation. You've got reports out there talking about the Jets are hiring 33rd team to help with their coaching search and all this good stuff, man. Listen, I've got my thoughts on it, but I want to first start off with the future of Aaron Rodgers. Parker, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I know it's been a tough season for Daniel, and I hope that you're all keeping him straight over there, making sure he's doing all right. The Jets not performing up to the standard. And then the article, the story that came out with the 33rd team or after they dropped the article, it's been a lot going on out there in New York. But I think with Aaron Rodgers, man, I don't know how as a team you can want to carry on and move forward with him. At this point, I think it's more of a sunk cost fallacy type issue where it's like, oh, we had him bring all of his friends in. We have all these pieces in place that we brought in for Aaron Rodgers. We committed so much to this experiment, to this process. Did we just have to give it another shot? In my opinion, I don't think that's true that you have to. I think you can move on. I think every time we've talked about the Jets on this show, and every time I've talked about the Jets in general, it's always been, plan for the future, because it's going to end at some point. It's going to be relatively soon, whether you choose to move on from him and the pieces around him, or they choose to move on from you. It's going to end. And so personally, I'm more of a rip the Band-Aid off type guy. I say, hey, it's the whole, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. You don't have to retire, but you're not going to be a Jet next year. So that's the direction I'd go. And I know it's the dead money. It's this and that. But at the end of the day, I don't know what value you're really getting out of him. I mean, we've seen him play the mentor role. How well that went or didn't go. I just don't know what he's bringing to your organization. Go get a young guy, maybe even get a stopgap guy in there and just try to fix this roster, fix this team, because you have more issues than Aaron Rodgers can solve at this point.
And I'm just gonna say, like, it's very clear I was wrong with this New York Jets team. And the New York Jets, I think that you summed it up perfectly. And I think the term, I was looking for this term for so long. I think it's a great term, the sunken cost foul. That's the thing that I feel like a lot of not just NFL organizations, but so many sports teams try to justify with themselves. And I feel like that's really where the good versus the great teams, make out, right? Is hey, whether it's in the draft or whether it's through trades, if you're going to continue to rely on guys that just because you put a huge investment in them, you're never going to grow as an organization. You're never going to grow as a team. So I think that that's where they got to go from here. Like the fact that you fired your head coach, you got rid of your GM. There is no world where you're gonna keep an Aaron Rodgers and it be super successful. Maybe they believe that that's the route, and maybe they believe that hey, there was reports that he's playing super injured, his hamstring. I just saw a dude who doesn't look the same. And I saw a dude, yes, he got injured, but I'm going to be honest, there were games where he was getting rocked. And as a 40-year-old dude, like it's just, I don't think his body can hold up much longer. And especially if you're the Jets, how are you going to start a new regime rolling with Aaron Rodgers? So I think that I'm with you. I think you just have to rip the band-aid off. And whether that's get a stopgap guy or whether you say, hey, I'm going to go try a Jalen Milroe. I'm going to go try, if you land in the top 5 of Cam Ward. Is that the route you want to go? It might be the route you have to go. But this organization as a whole, I don't think it was just Aaron Rodgers' fault. Like, let me say that. I think that this organization as a whole has just been ran poorly. And they've got all the talent in the world. I mean, we're talking the Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson. They're just not making it work. So Aaron Rodgers, I think I'm with you. I think he will be playing in 2025, obviously, as that report came out. But I struggle to see how it makes sense to go for another playoff push with Aaron Rodgers when the dude maybe has 1 to 2 years left. So what would you do, Parker? Would you go draft a guy? Would you get a stopgap guy? And also, would you even entertain releasing him now?
I don't think you release him now. I mean, I don't think they're in the business of saving that relationship. I don't think they're really concerned about that, but I just don't think there's a benefit to releasing him now opposed to releasing him next year, even, designating him as a post June 1 next year. Like, I don't think that you're in a rush to do that. I do think, you're kind of in more of a hurry to figure out what we're doing now, right? And that's where I can see him being an immediate release postseason just to get him out of the building, make sure we can reset. Because I agree 100% where you're bringing in a new GM, a new head coach. Like you're really trying to do this hard reset.
Yep.
And, in my opinion, it's always been, build the team for the quarterback, not around the quarterback. So I honestly don't know in a weak quarterback class, if you get in there and you try and swing on one of these guys and bring them in and have their risk there, do you try even, trading that pick out and trying to trade it down and get more capital? But I think, again, like I said, there's a lot more issues than just Aaron Rodgers. And I think once you move on from Aaron Rodgers, you're also moving on from a number of other players on this team right now. So I think you really just let's go get a GM and a head coach. Like, let's go get a GM that we align with. Let him get a head coach that he aligns with. So now we're all on the same page. And let's go into this offseason with the strategy to try and just start correcting this team and protecting the young pieces that we do have.
I have a question. Part of why I like this morning show is we dive deep into the details of stuff. Park, you made up a good point. Made a good point. You said the issues are deeper than Aaron Rodgers. I want to hear from you and Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think those issues are for the Jets? Parker, you can go first.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously have to start where I want to start, but I think, if you're just talking player personnel, you have this entire offense outside of Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, Braylon Allen is defunct.
Mm-hmm.
You have a Joe Tippmann that's looked solid. You have an Olu Foshadu who's been playing mostly guard this year, which, that's not what the plan for him was. So I think you have to overhaul that group, but then it's also the offense that they've been running. They haven't had a good system in place. It's been very clearly staff issues on both sides of the ball, but I think the defense it's been fine at times. Like we talked about that with kind of the solid thing going on. Like your defense isn't necessarily always the problem, but you have to figure out how to jumpstart this offense. And that's where kind of cleaning house there, correcting that stuff, going in and correcting this offensive line. So the young guy that you bring in, whenever that might be, can actually have a chance in the league and not be running for his life every play, and he can get the ball to your Garrett Wilsons and your Brees Hall out in the flats, and you can actually use this offense. But that's where I think it's just multiple levels of issues. It's the players on the team that need to get overhauled and corrected at positions. It's the coaching staff behind it, the scheme behind it, and that's where it's just you're gonna have to clean house on multiple levels when you do this reset if you want to do it correctly, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think the issue too, where also the problems align, is I think it also aligns with their owner, Woody Johnson. I think that, and obviously this is something where it's kind of like a Jerry Jones situation with the Cowboys when you've got your owner making a lot of these decisions, right? Woody Johnson wanted Aaron Rodgers. He wanted Aaron Rodgers benched after 2 losses. He wanted, Robert Saleh gone. He wanted the OC gone. He wanted a lot of these things. And it seems like if the owner is muddling in the way of a GM like a Joe Douglas, that's kind of where I think the disconnect was. And I think that they were always on the same page beforehand. This offseason, they were on the same page. But it's like, man, if you got the owner really saying and putting his imprint, it's almost like, why the hell have a GM? What's his job? And maybe Woody Johnson felt like he's making all these investments and he knows what's right for the team. But you're the guy that's middling in between this guy, Joe Douglas, and doing his job for him. So it's like, it's the same thing to where the next guy you hire, the GM, I feel like you have to really allow him to do his job. And I feel like it put a lot of pressure on Joe Douglas to do the right thing. The same thing, the Olufoshinu draft pick was one that I was kind of questioning because it seemed to go against what they wanted to do. Woody Johnson in this push for Aaron Rodgers and going out, getting Devontae Adams, the same thing with making the Mike Williams trade. It seems like they're going all in, but you're drafting for the future with Olufoshinu, right? He's a guy where day one, I didn't believe he could step in and be a star offensive tackle. It's like, are you building for the future? Are you building for now? I think that that's where a lot of the problems lie. And I think you just have to do a hard reset, and you can't push yourself to contend for one season. And I feel like that's the problem started at the top. So
Yeah.
That's kind of how I see the Jets.
I'm happy that we're bringing this conversation up because I think when you actually dive deep into it, it's very similar to a team like the Bengals, who we obviously cover. It's the drafting.
Yeah.
The drafting of some of these players. You can kind of just go back, you look at it. They spent the 15th overall pick on Will McDonald. Remember that? Remember that, guys?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought Will McDonald was going to be an absolute star. Then you got obviously the offensive lineman, Joe Tippmann. I think he's been sort of up and down in his career for the Jets. Carter Warren, offensive lineman, Israel, obviously. That was all in the 2023 draft. Then you look at the 2022 draft. The 2022 draft wasn't too bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the draft. They got Sauce Gardner, even though he's regressed a little bit, I would say. Garrett Wilson, who's been a main contributor for them. Jermaine Johnson kind of started off slow, had a good year. Then we're hoping to see some type of consistency there with him. Brees Hall, Jeremy Rucker, Max Mitchell. Then the list goes on, right? In 2021, you had the Zach Wilson, Elijah Vera Tucker draft, Elijah Moore, who's no longer on the team. When I look at it, it really comes down to the drafting of players that sometimes maybe kind of can hamper a team a little bit. And, I even look at it, a guy like Malachi Corley, who got drafted in the 3rd round this year, 16 yards on the season, guys, on 3 catches. 16 yards on 3 catches, guys. And it doesn't really seem like he's going to be able to see his full life potential. You go out there, you trade for guys like Devontae Adams, right? You obviously got Garrett Wilson already as the one. Where does that guy's growth come in?
Mm-hmm.
Where does he, essentially get to, progress his skill set in this Jets offense? I think some of it is some of the draft picks the Jets are having. We're not really seeing the field, and maybe that's why they moved on from the general manager.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it comes down to that. But I think I want to shift the conversation from just the future of Aaron Rodgers now down to their GM search, because I think the real conversation has to happen, and the conversation has to start with who realistically is coming in here that's going to fix the Jets' organizational issues, not just from the GM, but also from the head coach. Who are some realistic candidates, guys, that we think are logical candidates that make sense for a guy? You know, there was a guy that we were talking about a while ago in for the Texans and Bobby Slowick for head coaching. And I don't know. I think some of the regression of CJ Stroud has kind of cooled the water on a Bobby Slowick head coaching talk. And I think it should, honestly. I think these are good insights to sort of have, if you will. You know, you want to see how a offensive coordinator can develop their quarterback. And when they go through those rough spots, how can they get them to bounce back? Because that could be a good telltale of how that guy might do as a head coach, right? Because you're dealing with one specific player or one specific group, if that makes sense. I don't know. I'm looking at it. I'm trying to figure out in myself who makes sense to be the Jets' next head coach. People say Bill Belichick. I don't think that's ever happening. I think the way that situation ended years ago, where he left them high and dry for New England at the podium with a note card, I don't think that. I think that's always going to be, you know, embedded in Jets fans' minds, in Jets brass's mind. So we have to talk. Who ideally comes in and fix the Jets? It's crazy to me what a couple years out of the league will do. You got people out now clamoring for John Gruden. I don't know, man. Who comes in and fix the Jets next season? Daniel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the two parts of this, I don't necessarily know when you look at the head coach, if it's going to be, one of these guys like a Vrabel, like a Belichick, like a Gruden. I think that the smart move could be go offensive minded guy. Obviously, the Ben Johnson's the hot name. I think that this is a team where you could use the offensive minded guy. You don't necessarily need, a huge culture reset. Obviously, you do need a reset, but I think that it would be smart to get an offensive minded guy, albeit that was your biggest problem the past couple of years. And that kind of leads me to my next thing. I think that with the problems lining from the top down, I feel like the GM is actually going to be more important in this search than the head coaches, which is why I would personally go with the offensive-minded guy at head coach. And the GM brings me to the point that if you miss on a Zach Wilson, I think that that's something where I didn't give, enough of, I didn't pinpoint Joe Douglas and this organization enough for that. Obviously, it's hard to hit a draft pick, but with a top 3 pick, if you miss on a top 3 pick, that is going to set your franchise back. And I think that that's something that's not talked about enough for the Jets, saying, hey, whether it was Wilson's fault or the organization's fault, you had a top 2 pick and you swung and you missed. And that deserves to see, a huge criticism for that. So when I look at who's the guys that could do the job, I think there's a lot of very, very qualified GM, candidates out there. I really like, I don't know the guy's name, but he works with the Cowboys. He's one of their guys under Stephen Jones. I'm a huge fan of him. And then I really like the guy. He's the one that's getting thrown in all these names with the Detroit Lions, Ray Agnew. He's the guy that has really helped build, the culture for the Detroit Lions. He's really helped Brad Holmes. He's really helped Dan Campbell. So those are two guys I really look at. And like I said, I think that when I look at it, I would go offensive minded for the head coach because that's been your biggest problem. And you still have pieces. Maybe Adams isn't on the team next year, but you still have Garrett Wilson. You have Breece Hall. Somebody should be able to work with this.
You know what's crazy? Somebody put in the comment section, and Parker, I want to get your reaction and thoughts to this as well as Daniel's. They said Todd Monken. People forget Todd Monken was supposed to be looked at as a head coach, and he kept getting passed over, and he left. He left the NFL. He left the NFL, went to college, did great at college, came back to the NFL, and what do you know? Is doing great again. But that's a guy, back when he was the Buccaneers offensive coordinator, a lot of people thought that, wow, this guy could really take the next step. If you remember, the Bengals also interviewed him to be the head coach of Cincinnati. Todd Monken, he's an older guy, obviously, at this point. Not super old, but he's an older guy at this point. But he's been consistent. His offenses have been consistent in the National Football League. And you look at the work he's done with a guy like Lamar Jackson. You get the work that he did at Georgia with guys like Stetson Bennett. And, you got to ask yourself the question, could Todd Monken make sense for the Jets? You get the offensive-minded coach. You get an older guy. But you also have the Aaron Rodgers factor when we are discussing the Jets. How does that work? Because, I feel like dealing with Aaron Rodgers is very similar to dealing with a LeBron James in a sense where it makes a lot of sense for the player, more so than the actual coach, because the coach is going to want to have his system that he might want to implement. And I believe Todd Monken might have his pick of where he might want to go, especially if you're a coach. I mean, if you're a team looking to hire a veteran coach and a guy that's done it before, I think Todd Monken makes a lot of sense. I thought that guy should have been head coach a long time ago. I think that guy passed up. And one thing I will say is I've been very, very good at picking head coaches in the National Football League and guys that I think make a lot of sense for teams. So Todd Monken's a guy. He's not a sexy name. He's a guy that's been around for a long time. But if you're looking for stability, if you're looking for a guy that can help take your team over the top, especially offensively, I think he makes a lot of sense. You know who Todd Monken reminds me of, guys, a little bit? Gary Kubiak. That's who he reminds me of a little bit. Just waiting for that opportunity. Obviously, Gary Kubiak had his chance with the Texans. Always filled good offensive rosters. Got a chance to be the Broncos head coach. Took them over the top. Won a championship with them. Again, when they hired him, wasn't a sexy name. People forget there was a one point in time where it felt like the Kubiak name was starting to wear thin a little bit because you kept hearing it over and over and over again. But it was like people thought that guy would be a lifer play caller. He got into a head coaching role with the Broncos, did fantastic, was able to field some amazing offenses for them. And then when I look at it, I look at Todd Monken as in a very similar stature. I think Todd Monken makes a lot of sense, not just for potential Jets, but for a couple of teams. I think Todd Monken makes sense, and I wouldn't mind seeing that guy land a job.
And if you go out and get a Todd Monken, that kind of leads to potentially drafting a quarterback in this year's class. I mean, you look at Todd Monken's a guy that has worked with quarterbacks in the past, and that could be the route that he chooses to go. But Parker, what do you think about the Jets head coaching and GM spot?
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with what you said earlier, Daniel, where, as far as what you're doing, you're going to need to bring in an offensive guy. And I think as far as the head coach goes, you're going to have to bring in an offensive guy and you have to fix this offense. I feel like you have a defense that's in place personnel wise. You have guys there that you can work around. I feel like you can bring in a defensive coordinator that can just maintain that. But I do think it comes down to a lot of what your future GM does. And I think your future GM, like you hit on, building this team via the draft. And I think if you want to kind of reset this team, it's not necessarily about bringing in these free agents. It's not about bringing in talent that's already in the league. It's going in there. It's amassing draft capital and then hitting on those picks. I mean, another person in that same class that I talked about outside of Zach Wilson, Trey Lance. I mean, Trey Lance is getting moved around for 4th, 5th, 6th rounders now. So, I mean, and he's still sitting on the bench. So, I mean, it is hard to hit on picks, but you have to have a guy that isn't going to cripple your team with misses, where if you don't feel confident in something, you're willing to maybe move back a little bit, get some extra capital, and kind of reload for the future. And that's where I think the GM search is going to be interesting. It's going to be very, very interesting. But funny enough, my name for head coach was Todd Monken. I think he's a great guy that builds a really good culture. He's got a great offensive mind. I think he could fix this team over an offseason as far as kind of resetting the culture in the building post Aaron Rodgers, as well as, again, cleaning up the scheme and making this a functional offense again. I think that'd be the best candidate in my opinion.
Because you're
a guy that does more than just fix the offense or work with your quarterback. You have to have a culture shift in this Jets locker room because it's not in a good place right now. And so I think he's a guy that can come in and do that.
And he's a guy, I feel like he's going to be at his peak this offseason potentially. I mean, you look at how the Ravens are looking right now. I definitely like that. And I definitely think that it's kind of funny. I think, Malik, you said that he was interviewed for the Bengals head coaching job. I forgot about that. That was a long time ago, 6 years. But yeah, I like that. I like Todd Monken and the Ravens. I like that. I mean, to the Jets.
We brought up earlier some of the GMs. I think the guy you were referring to, Daniel, that worked with the Cowboys, Will McClay. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. It's yeah.
Will McClay, he makes a lot of sense. You also got to wonder, and Danny, I want you to touch on him a little bit more. What makes you think he's attractive for the Jets' potential general manager job?
Yeah, I definitely liked how just not only I feel like I saw some of his interviews, and then just because I live in California and I went to some of the training camps and I just saw, how even some of the coaches were speaking about him. And I've just been a huge fan of him. And I know a couple Cowboys fans who have raved about him saying, hey, well, Jerry's the guy that makes all the decisions. And then even Stevens, doing this, but who's really the real talent evaluator? And they're saying it's Will. And I just heard a lot of good things about him. I think that he's a guy where, in that Cowboys organization, you're not going to have the true chance to shine. We've even seen that with a lot of their coaches, and we've even seen that with a lot of the guys in the upper management. So I've just seen a lot of good things, and I've seen a lot of Cowboys fans seriously rave about him. So I'm just kind of taking the word with them, and their team where they've had a ton of talent. They've had a ton of talent or success drafting. And just getting guys to have success, not only in the first and second round, but they've had a lot of guys late in, fourth, fifth rounders that have really, really hit. So I think that whether that's fully on him or not, I think that they've just done a very good job drafting. And same thing, they've built up a consistency with their offensive line that's really been their identity. So I don't know. I've just heard a lot of good things about him.
So there's a guy that is not a sexy name that I think makes a lot of sense. In Parker, I remember I didn't expect to spend as much time as we have on this conversation, but Alec Hallaby. Okay, he works with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's their assistant general manager. He worked in the analytical department. The Eagles, in my opinion, have the best general manager in all of football who finds a way to be aggressive, go out there and make trades that make a lot of sense. I actually, Adam Peters might be, but he's in his first year with the Commanders, so I want to kind of give him a little time. I don't want to do exactly what I just said don't do with the Texans, but Adam Peters I've been very, very impressed with. But Alec Hallaby is a guy that I think makes a lot of sense. He worked in the analytical department for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a guy that really worked his way throughout the system. And you want to talk about a guy who's been a part of that culture for so long and has been a part of brokering a lot of these deals that have happened. I think he makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure he'd be interested in stepping out on his own for an opportunity to go to an AFC team. The Eagles obviously probably won't see him as too much of a competition, but I think he makes a lot of sense.
And real quick, Parker, before you get your opinion on that, let me just say they've built the best roster in football. So whether that's on him or whether that's on Howie Roseman, like Malik, it is absurd how good their roster is. And it's not just the first level guys. It is the second level guys. I mean, we can talk about the defensive line, obviously. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, you got edge rusher, Nolan Smith, their linebackers, and the Kobe Dean, right? Josh Sweat as the edge rusher, Bryce Huff's on the IR, but you go look at the cornerbacks, Quinyon Mitchell, Darius Slay, Cooper DeJean, their safeties, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship. This is the best roster in the NFL. So shout out whether that's on him or Howie Roseman. They deserve praise. Because as talented as Jalen Hurts is, this roster is the best roster in football. So just wanted to shout out them real quick. Shout out Howie Roseman because you put this team, there's no reason why they can't make the Super Bowl. This roster is absurd. But Parker, what were your thoughts on Hallaby?
Hey, there is a reason, and it starts with Nick over there, buddy. There's definitely a reason. Just wanted to throw that out there. The GM search is interesting, man. That's just where I'm at with it. I think there's a lot of interesting candidates, and I do think that's a strong point to go get a guy that has a history of success. But then it's also, I kind of like what they said in the comments, the chat here. The Cowboys one's interesting as well because you're more familiar being in an organization where you're going to have an owner that's breathing down your neck all the time and telling you what to do and having strong opinions with things. And that's something you have to consider where you have some of these GMs that have been running personnel departments or they've seen how personnel departments have been run. Then they're going to come to New York and they're going to have to deal with a lot of things outside of, just scouting and player evaluation and personnel management, but you're also dealing with potentially a Woody Johnson, potentially still an Aaron Rodgers. And that's where I just think, back to the Aaron Rodgers conversation, if you don't move on from him, it's going to make it very hard to bring in a candidate that you actually would like to bring in to your team. But yeah, there's a lot of other variables that I think makes this not such an appealing job. Unless there's, conditions put in place where it's like, oh yeah, I'd love to, be on the Jets outside of, X, Y, and Z. So
100%.
It is definitely interesting.
Well, one thing I'll say too, Liam, he's making a play in the comment section for a Les Snead, I guess, to be the general manager. But the Rams aren't letting him out of that contract. I think that you look at it, they realize they have one of the better GMs in football. He just got to be, I guess they got to be more consistent with getting him more picks to make those picks. Obviously, not trading them away all the time. And I guess that's partly on him.
Look at the assistants in the building, though. Look at the assistants in the building. That's where you really want to start this search.
Correct. And the reason why I'm such a huge fan of Hallaby is I just think that him coming from sorry, oh my gosh, him coming from Eagles organization that has won a Super Bowl. And remember, he spent the first 6 seasons as their vice president of football operations, right? And this is a guy that is continuing to grow. But I think having a general manager that accepts the ideology of analytics, right, the new age thinking, so to speak, makes a lot of sense for an organization like the Jets. And you also get a guy that's used to playing in big markets. Philadelphia is a big market. Philadelphia is a market where if you're not winning, you're going to hear about it. If they're pissed, you're going to hear about it. So obviously, while he hasn't been necessarily the lead man, he's dealt with the pressures of being a part of an organization. I think Alec Hallaby is probably GM1 on my potentially search for a lot of these teams out there. And let's not forget, he interviewed with the Commanders and the Panthers last year. So that should tell you everything that you need to know about who he potentially could be as a general manager, as himself. And I understand people are saying Ray Agnew. I saw Daniel mention bring him up. I see Marissa's now bringing him up. I again, it's early. It's early with the Lions a little bit, right? It's early with the Lions. This is a guy that's been a part of this Eagles culture for over 8 years, over 9 years. He's proven himself, and he continued. He excelled at the vice president job. He's excelling in this new role as assistant general manager, and I think he's going to find himself as a general manager. And I think teams are starting to catch on a little bit. You obviously also have Trey Brown for the Cincinnati Bengals, who people have been extremely high on in his thinking, and people want to see him in a general manager role sooner rather than later. And Bengals got to figure out what they want to do with that, because maybe they need to make a little bit of a change there, get a little bit of a shift, if you will. But those are all good things to talk to. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens with the Jets. I didn't expect to talk about the Jets this long, whether it be from Aaron Rodgers or the GM search, but I just find it very interesting that they're outsourcing, if you will, for that. Want to keep the conversation rolling. Listen, Parker, I want to get to some of the overreactions. It's been a while since we've done some of our overreactions for this past week 12. If you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content from the TWSN studios. Parker, let me get some of your overreactions for this past week of the NFL, you and Daniels.
Yeah, I think. Oh man, I got a big bar for myself that I've put in place now ever since I cursed the Texans a few weeks ago. So I gotta. No, I think my biggest overreaction, just from it's really more of a season long thing, but especially coming out of this Kansas City Panthers game, I want to be the guy that gets yelled at online all week this week, I guess. But I don't think the Chiefs are going to be in contention for the 1 seed by the end of the season, personally.
So you think that it's going to be, who would be the team that you think? Ravens, Bills?
I think it's between the Ravens and Bills, potentially the Steelers, if the Steelers want to figure it out and go on a run and everybody else kind of settles in. But I think it's the Ravens and the Bills right now for me, when the season's all said and done, are competing for that top seed.
So you think, real quick, just looking at the schedule, you think, if you had to make a guess, how many games? They've got 6 games left on the schedule. They've got Raiders, Chargers, Browns, Texans, Steelers, Broncos. You think that they lose 2 of those next?
I think they could very easily lose 2 of them. I mean, I'm immediately eyeing that Browns team, the Steelers game, because I just think the Browns play teams tough, and not that they're a better team than the Chiefs.
Yeah.
But if anybody's going to give you a problem, it's going to be the Browns in Cleveland. And you also play Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. You play, and then Denver's been a scrappy team. They took you down to the wire last time they played you. You could say the same thing about the other 2 divisional games they have remaining on the schedule. I think there's still a lot of potential for them to stumble, and I think that'd be kind of, rooting for a little diversity in the playoff run again, maybe a little bit. But.
No, I'm with you. I like that. If I had to give, I've got a couple. My number one, I would say, is more of a niche one. It's this, with the Seattle Seahawks. I think the Seattle Seahawks with Mike McDonald can be absurdly good. I think this team can be a top tier contender in the next couple of years. I think that their offensive coordinator has been a huge issue, and I think Geno Smith is a huge issue. But this Seattle Seahawks team, so my takeaway really is that they need to either get rid of the offensive coordinator, and they need to find a future at the quarterback position. Geno Smith has played fine. He's played good. When you look at his stats, I believe he actually leads the NFL in passing yards. But he's got 13 interceptions. He makes timely turnovers. And this is also coming off of a win. So I think that this is where I think it's important that see this team for what they are. They're currently leading the NFC West. So you're not going to make any changes this year, right? You're not going to get rid of Geno Smith. You're not going to bench him. He's playing fine. But I think that for this team to truly hit their ceiling, right, with Mike McDonald as your first-year head coach, for you to make the playoffs, potentially to win the division, that's a win. But where do you go from here? And that's what my thought process is. You cannot get complacent as a Seattle Seahawks fan. You cannot get complacent as a Seattle Seahawks front office. And that's how I would be approaching this, saying, hey, I rewatched this defense, and this is really where my mind goes. Devon Witherspoon and Leonard Williams are two of the best NFL defenders in the entire league. They are absurd. Witherspoon off of the edge in blitzes, quarterback keeps, in playing man-to-man coverage, and playing zone coverage. This dude is one of the best cornerbacks. People forget he was a top 5 pick. And when I look at Leonard Williams, I just have to rave about him because this dude is making offense linemen look silly, whether it's bull rush, whether it's in the run. This dude, and I went back and rewatched his college tape. This dude is absurd. So the Seattle Seahawks, I feel like they have to do their due diligence this offseason to say, hey, what's our future at the quarterback position? Because Geno Smith, after this year, only has one more year, I believe, on his contract. And they've got to do something because this defense can be very good. And if you can shore up the offensive line, maybe draft a tackle in the first round, or maybe go sign somebody, I think that this team could be seriously dangerous. But Geno Smith and the offensive coordinator will hold them back. But Parker, what you got next for takeaways?
Yeah, but real quick, I want to talk about that a little bit more,
Yeah.
honestly, because I feel like the Seattle Seahawks are one of the more interesting situations in the league that just doesn't get talked about because they are a team that it feels like they have a pretty good handle on their own division. So they're always eyeing a playoff spot. They're always looking to get, involved in the dance in some way, but they are in a spot where, having as consistent of, relative successes they've had over the last few years, especially now, and kind of projecting forward a year, what we expect them to do. They're not going to be a crazy different team next year, you'd assume. How long until like this kind of average to above average success kind of catches up with them and like kind of hurts their team building process, right? Where you're never really getting those higher draft picks. It's like, is it going to be just we're going to ride the Geno train and then after his last year, we're just going to let it, be a full on tank job the year after and go get the next quarterback in that class? Or like what is this looking like? Are the Seahawks on the tank for Arch Manning train? Like, I'm kind of curious to see where this team goes because they do have in my opinion, a very strong roster. Like even if you lose a Geno Smith, you could very easily get a stopgap guy in there, which you can argue Geno Smith might be, who's going to do relatively similar as far as levels of production go in that offense. And like you talked about, there's some really fun pieces on this defense. I just wonder kind of what the future in your eyes looks like for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I think that it's got to, and I'm curious to see where they go with it too. I would be looking ahead, and I think that I would be going the route of the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers. I would be going the route with the Atlanta Falcons with Michael Penix Jr. That's what I would do. So whether it's you go draft a guy in round 2 this year that you like and try to develop him, or you go look in and try to get one of these retreads like a Zach Wilson to say, hey, we're going to get this guy, sit behind Geno Smith, and if the opportunity arises, we're going to play him. So I think that that's where I would go. It depends on how they finish the season, but I would for sure be doing my due diligence this offseason. I don't know if there's a star available or a potential even starter. Like the name like Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, these are names that sound good that if I'm in the front office, I'm at least kicking the tires with, saying, hey, let me try to bring in a Trey Lance in here. Let me try to bring in a Zach Wilson in here. I know they tried that with Sam Howell, but I think that there's a different level of Sam Howell versus, and it sounds crazy, but Sam Howell versus a Trey Lance versus a Zach Wilson, or even drafting a guy in round 2, because we saw what happened with Russell Wilson. They got, I'm not going to say they got lucky, but it wasn't a first round pick. So I think if you're an organization, you have to trust your scouting department. You have to trust that you can do something with one of these quarterbacks. And I would be looking to say, hey, let me draft a guy in round 3. Let me draft a guy in round 4, and at least do my due diligence to say, hey, on this roster is somebody that we could potentially see being the next starter for us, because I'd be looking to seriously life after Geno. I would not re-sign Geno Smith to a massive deal after this. So yeah.
I would say my biggest overreaction is, and it's really, I think, listen, it's cool what Saquon Barkley's doing. I think a lot of people are just, going a little too crazy over it. For me, I feel like the Rams are a team that have a deficiency at the linebacker position personally. And I'm not really too surprised that he was able to have the success that he had. And obviously, the numbers he put up were gaudy. It was great. But I feel like a lot of people have been using this as an opportunity to dunk on the Giants organization for allowing Saquon Barkley to walk when they have much deeper issues than just Saquon Barkley and losing a running back, in my honest opinion. Another one of my overreactions, I would say, I don't want to give the Chiefs any type of, conversation, so I won't mention them or say what it is that I want to say, but I will say, I personally think that it's time for the Falcons to maybe consider at some point turning to Michael Penix Jr. just to see what he has personally, because I think that I don't know. I'm getting real Vikings vibes with Kirk Cousins led Falcons, and this is not just an overreaction for Week 12. This is an overreaction I've seen for the season for me, and it's something that I wouldn't mind seeing. And I think last but not least, I have seen enough to say that I think the Bills might be different this year. And I know we need a chance to do our overreactions last week, Parker, but I think the Bills might be different this year. The Bills might be ready to make a push forward. And I think that maybe they'll buck that trend of a coach and a quarterback, having success potentially beyond year 5 together. I really was hoping Zach Taylor and the Bengals would do that, but maybe that's something that that might just happen. Let us know in the comment section what your overreactions are. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or upload content. I want to move on over to our Bengals talk. Joe Mixon recently was in the media, had a sit-down interview with one of my good friends, Josina Anderson, in which he essentially called out the lack of usage for him from the Bengals coaching staff. And shocking enough, he called out the media. He called out the media. And I wanted to get what you guys' thoughts were on Joe Mixon's comments regarding all of that. I want to start with you, Parker.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the conversation. I've seen the quotes. I tried to get eyes on the clip, but I don't. If there was really a concern with his overall usage in Cincinnati, I think that's misplaced. I don't think he was used more or less than he should have been in his situation with his skill set, with what direction the offense was going. I can see him having frustrations with kind of what was put around him, but at the same time, like I've been saying all season, he's playing like a different player in Houston right now than he was really ever in Cincinnati. He's doubled certain stats that are running back stats. They're not offensive line stats. They're not scheme stats. They're independent individual running back stats. And so that's where it's just like he's playing like he's happier in his situation. And there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of rumors and stories thrown about what happened around him in Cincinnati. But I think overall, I just think it was a good move for both people. And I think it is weird that he just keeps kind of throwing shots at local media and the team when I feel like he was really maximized. I think one of the few players that's ever been maximized in this Zach Taylor led Bengals team. I think he was one of them. So I just think it's all kind of a little interesting, but that's just kind of my opinion on it.
Yeah, I think that I'm with you. I think that Joe Mixon and this whole thing, people are acting also like Joe Mixon, if he were on this Bengals team, that he would mean 2 more wins for this Bengals team. And I think that's where my thought process is. I think that's foolish. I don't think that Joe Mixon, if he's on this team, he makes a massive difference. I feel like this Bengals team and the Bengals problems are rooted much bigger than losing a Joe Mixon. So while the sentiment that the Bengals should have kept Joe Mixon could be true, I can see a world where if you keep Joe Mixon, you have him as a 1-2 punch with Chase Brown, you could be in a better spot than you were with Zach Moss and Chase Brown. I totally can see that. But I truly feel like even Joe Mixon, there were moments with the Bengals, he didn't look good. And I think whether that's a scheme problem or whether it just wasn't a fit, I struggle to see how if Joe Mixon was on this roster that he's changing a whole boatload of the Bengals problems. We all saw the same Joe Mixon at many times. He just wasn't breaking tackles. He wasn't, in the run game. He wasn't, an efficient guy in the short yardage game. And we've seen this year that that's a common trend with the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think that that's not an indictment of Joe Mixon because he's having success with the Texans, but it's something that it could be with the Bengals team. So for him to, kind of say what he said, it was like he's just kind of throwing shots. Okay. But I think that the conversation for me is really with the Bengals fans that are, either wishing Joe Mixon was still here or blaming the Bengals for not re-signing him. I think that there's a lot bigger issues that are about this team as to why they didn't re-sign him. And even if he was on this team, I still don't think he's having as successful a year with the Bengals this year as he's having with the Texans. It's whether, like I said, whether that's a scheme, it's just not how this Bengals team has had success. And you can date that back to multiple 3 seasons. They've consistently struggled on short yardage, whether that's because they're passing at a 70% clip and not running the ball consistently. This is something where it just wasn't working. And I don't know if he's on this team that if he's having as much success as he is with the Texans. So that's my thoughts on Mixon.
Well, and then on top of that, like you brought up, I think there is kind of a disconnect. I feel like, fans were very frustrated that they didn't see enough Chase Brown early on in the year, right? Like they're like, oh, this should be closer to a 50-50 split. It should be 60-40, whatever side of that argument you sat on with him and Zach Moss. You wouldn't probably have seen any Chase Brown at this point of the year if they had Joe Mixon, barring an injury or something crazy happening. Like it wouldn't have been the running back by committee. It would have still been the Joe Mixon bell cow show, kind of like what he is doing down in Houston. That's where I think the Bengals are better off moving to this more committee approach, even though it's turned into more of a Chase Brown bell cow situation right now. But you would have seen very little Chase Brown, who's ended up being a pretty fun little player. If Joe Mixon was still in the building. So it's just something to consider as well.
A fun little player is crazy.
Fun little player. It's a fun little player. I don't want to say he's a good running back yet, but he's a fun little player.
One thing I'll say is, and the reason why we posed the question is because I think that the larger part of this is getting misconstrued. We posed this question, and the reason why I had you both go first is because instantly the conversation goes to, well, they should have kept him or they shouldn't have kept him. And that's what people are arguing. Mm-hmm. We're missing the big picture here. We're missing the fact that Joe Mixon took issue with the way he was utilized in Cincinnati, right? And also mainly the way he was treated in Cincinnati, which mm-hmm. I personally think speaks to a little bit of a disconnect. I don't really care about why he was traded or he should have been here or whatever the case may be. That conversation has come and gone for me. To me, it speaks to it's a bigger issue. It's how your head coach is viewed amongst the locker room. Regardless, people think Joe Mixon was viewed as a locker room leader on this team, and people could try to spin it whichever way they want. He was beloved by his teammates. And now the Bengals lack real leadership. That's not to say that they should have kept him. That's not to say any of that, but that is to say, what did that do to the locker room? Because the locker room definitely noticeably looks a little bit more fractured, which is why, you have the coach going out there doing things such as, hey, we're going to bring back ping pong tables and all this kind of stuff like that to implement that culture. We're going to get together more as a team and have more team camaraderie. You notice that there's things that mess up. If a player messes up on the sideline, there's not that leader that's talking them through. It's Joe Burrow usually going off, sitting by himself with the iPad in his hands. You don't really have someone kind of galvanizing the troops saying, hey, we got to get this thing going, right? And I think that there's a real leadership you lack when it comes to that. Joe Mixon's gone, though. Nothing's going to change that. But I will say some of the dents in the armor that we've seen, some of the dents in the armor that we've seen, if you will, such as players arguing on the sideline, Trey Hendrickson slapping Zach Taylor's hand down, players speaking out more so in the media. What does that? What do you guys make of that from a leadership standpoint, from a head coach? Right? For me, I think that speaks to a guy that probably the honeymoon phase has been over for this team, but the Super Bowl lore that came with that is kind of wearing off as well. People are now looking at you like, what have you done lately? And if you want to gain respect in this league, you have to win. You have to put up wins, and you have to put up or shut up. I think that's the bigger conversation here that needs to be talked about. It's not about the fact that Joe Mixon would have done anything whether differently when he was here in Cincinnati. Since I think Chase Brown honestly fits the system a lot better. I think the reason why the Bengals don't overly have a dominant run game, no matter who the running back is because of their lack of consistency with choosing the run game and allowing the run game to kind of propel them forward. I think that's more of a fundamental issue, and I don't think no matter who the offensive line coach, whether it be Frank Pollock or Jim Turner, whoever you bring in here, I don't know if that really changes because I just don't think that that's how Zach Taylor calls his games. But I think that more so this speaks to a leadership deficiency from the head coach. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, and even Jacqueline Hyde kind of made a good point. Said, is it weird to kind of think that this may be Mixon kind of helping out his teammates still here by saying what he did? Like, he's in a spot where he can say these things and put pressure for change subtly. I don't necessarily know if that was his thought process, but I think that there is a world where, like you said, look at why didn't Joe Mixon say what he said? How does Joe Mixon feel about the Bengals? I'm sure he doesn't feel great about them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that could show how he views.
He said he had a lot of love for the Bengals. Let's be clear. He said they have a lot of love for the Bengals. It's more so just the way he was treated by the media, he says, and he said the way he was utilized here. Mm-hmm. And I want to get to one quick thing. Jared Gundler says the reason they do not have a good running game is because inside offensive line suspect. Yes, which speaks to a greater issue. The Bengals refuse to really go all in and pay ridiculous amounts of money for elite guard play. They will never view the guard position as they view the tackle position. They'll never pay double digits for guard play for some of these elite guards. I see even people out there fantasizing for a Trey Smith thing. That's not happening because the type of money he's going to command in free agency is going to be well over the market price the Bengals are willing to pay. So when you look at it from that perspective, the conclusion comes down to they settle for guys like a Cordell Volson or like a Alex Kappa, who's good but average, if you will, and guys they don't have to go out there and pay ridiculous amount of money for. So therefore, you always will get average guard play, which might affect the way that you call the game when you're actually on the football field, which makes you think maybe, hey, we're not going to line up under center. It's not because our quarterback doesn't necessarily love it, and he probably doesn't love it, but that speaks to a greater issue. Why doesn't he love it? No player just to say, I don't like turning my back to the defense. It's because, hey, I might be worried about my guard play. I might be worried about what's coming after I turn my back to that defense. So I think it speaks to a greater issue. It's a fundamental issue that shows, the lack of urgency of, we want to pay elite money for guard play happens on the football field, right? It affects the football field, and then it affects the coaching to some degree.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's kind of where this whole Joe Mixon thing is. Like, it's clear right now with the Bengals, and we haven't obviously dove into it this show, but it's clear that the Bengals have a locker room problem right now. And it's not like this is, I've seen even some Bengals fans trying to defend that, there is no problems in the locker room. Bringing the ping pong tables back, all this stuff, they know that there is a problem in the locker room. Like, I feel like that's as clear as day. They know that there's, Jamar Chase speaking out. They know Joe Burrow is frustrated. You're trying to do everything to get back in the good graces of your players, and you just need to get wins on the board. But like you were talking about with Joe Mixon, I think that Mixon just had, whether he's not a fan of Zach Taylor or whether he's not a fan of Duke Tobin, I don't know. But I think that it's clearly something that the players feel about this coaching staff and the way things are being handled, that they feel like it's on them versus it's on the players. Yeah. And that's just where my thought process with this.
Man, I appreciate that, Dan. I appreciate the conversation we're having too, man. Make sure you guys do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or upload content from the TWSN studios. Park, man, I want to thank you so much for joining us for another episode, man. This is our last episode, morning episode of the week, because it is obviously Thanksgiving, Black Friday. Want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, man, you and your loved ones. I hope that you have an amazing week. We look forward to joining us back on the show next Tuesday, us talking everything through, and let's see if the Bengals can get a victory.
For sure, man. Let's go for a victory Monday again this week. It's coming off the bye. You're supposed to win that game. Let's do it. Hope you all have a great holiday weekend, man. I really hope everything's good for y'all out there. And
Yes, sir.
let's go, Tom Aspinall.
Let's go, man. Tommy Aspinall,
Yes,
man.
sir.
My guy. Well, listen, Park, we'll be talking with you soon, man. And I'll be sure to send you my Thanksgiving turkey as well.
Y'all take it.
You take care, man. That's my guy, Parker Blake, joining us live on the Sit Down Morning Show each and every single Tuesday and Thursday. As I said, this is our last morning show for the week because of the holiday season. We want to make sure that you guys are enjoying it with your family and friends and loved ones. Let's move on over to Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall has a huge announcement. He says it's going live today. The speculation is, what could that announcement be? Is it a fight with John Jones? Is John Jones relinquishing the belt to give Tom Aspinall the heavyweight championship? Who knows? And I want to spread the word of Bengals guru, the Bengals GM, the add him to the front office. He said, Bengals guru, spread the word. I know you got me, Malik. I got you, brother. Let's get Bengals guru more recognition as well, man. But yeah, Tom Aspinall, John Jones is a fight that makes a lot of sense. We've talked about it at as a nauseating pace on this show. I don't know what Tom Aspinall's announcement can be, but it's got to be one of those two things. I hope it's John Jones versus Tom Aspinall. Both guys are in a negotiation with the UFC for their next fights. I think it makes sense for a lot of reasons. Yeah, man, Daniel, I want to get what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think that my thoughts on this, Malik, is John Jones has the name, and John Jones has the situation of being the greatest fighter of all time. And for me, my thought process of this fight, first off, the announcement, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be the fight announcement, but I'm confident saying at this point now, I think that this fight's going to happen. And from everything that we're seeing from John Jones saying it's going to happen, from Tom Aspinall giving these little hints, to Tom Aspinall saying, Dana White looked at him after the fight and gave him a wink and kind of alluded to this fight happening. I'm curious to see this now, man. And the reason why I say that is I felt all along that John Jones was ducking Tom Aspinall. I felt all along that John Jones didn't want to fight Tom, similar to, kind of what he did with Francis Ngannou. I felt like he was scared of a Tom Aspinall. I felt like he was willing to ride off into the sunset and say, hey, I'm not even going to fight him anymore. This is going to make me dive deeper into what John Jones feels like is his path to victory. Because this is the one guy, for, those of you who are watching who aren't too familiar with him or are familiar, this is kind of the matchup for John Jones that we're saying there is not a clear path to victory for John Jones. Tom Aspinall is great on the ground. Tom Aspinall is a bigger, natural, heavyweight, where John Jones is a smaller, light heavyweight. And this is going to make me look, what does John Jones see as his path to victory? Because every single fight, John is super intelligent. John is, one of the most intelligent fighters we've ever seen. And the way he breaks down the game, he said exactly how he's going to beat Cyril Gane. He broke down Stipe Miocic's game, and we saw how he made him look abysmal. I'm curious to see what John Jones sees in Tom Aspinall. I think that's where my mind goes, because this is a shift from the entire fight week from before, where John was pushing Tom Aspinall away, and he didn't even want to entertain that. And now it seems like he's excited for that. So I think, and I know it kind of went a little off topic, but that's where my mind goes, Malik, is saying, hey, where John Jones feels like, because it feels like he's confident, and maybe it's different for me, but I didn't feel he was confident entertaining this Tom Aspinall fight before. So maybe it's a thing where he sees the money sign now, but that's where my mind goes. I'm curious to see what John Jones sees.
It's very similar to how boxing goes. You want to see the fixation with it first. You want to make sure people actually are clamoring for it. People want to see the fight before you actually give them what they want. It's a smart play, but there is a real threat that's involved for John Jones's record. And I won't say necessarily legacy, because I think his legacy is at down at light heavyweight. I don't think his legacy is really up at heavyweight. So I think whatever happens from now on, it really doesn't do too much damage. But I think John still wanted to retire without a true defeat on his record, not counting that disqualification. Guys, do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or upload content. Daniel, let's get to our favorite bets for the day. I want to let you take this one away, man, and we're going to head out of here.
Beautiful. I'll give two of my favorite bets. Once again, guys, we appreciate everybody tuning in. We have our full best bets in the QR code. You guys can go check it out here. NFL, we have 5 more weeks of the season heading into the playoffs. We've got a group chat in there. Make sure you guys just go subscribe if you want them. Super affordable. But NBA, we've got a couple games on the slate. Personally, this is a slate where I kind of like the slate. This one of my favorite matchups is the Miami Heat versus the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks have one of the worst defenses in the NBA. And it's pretty simple to where this is a matchup where you just look at their guards. Damian Lillard is not a good defender. He's not. He's a guy, he shoots 15 to 20 times a game. He's not focused on defense. He's a smaller guard. I'm looking at Tyler Hero's points at 20 plus points. I think this is super. I really like this line. And Tyler Hero's a guy where he's been, kind of the engine to their scoring offense. When Jimmy Butler's off the court, it really is a Tyler Hero-led show. I like Tyler Hero, 20-plus points. And if there's something else I like, there's a good matchup tonight, Malik. It's Lakers versus Suns. And this is one where, both teams kind of really rise to the occasion. But I really think that this is a matchup where I like Anthony Davis in this matchup. I like Anthony Davis in the spot. He's kind of tended to have success against the Phoenix Suns center, Yusuf Nurkic, and Anthony Davis. I like his points and rebounds in this game. This is a matchup that we typically see. It's a close matchup, right? It's prime time. It's typically always a close game. And that's in NBA betting, you get screwed over most of the time by blowouts. If you can predict which game is not going to be a blowout and you're taking it over, you're in for business. And that's typically where people have failures. And I think this is a perfect game to bet. I think this is a perfect game to parlay the Kevin Durant, the LeBron James, the Anthony Davis props. And I'm just keeping it simple. I'll give me Anthony Davis's over points and rebounds at 39.5. I think he goes over that. He'll play 35 to 40 minutes. I love Anthony Davis's matchup tonight against the Phoenix Suns.
Well, I love a play for that game. I'm happy that we both picked that game out. I really like Dalton Connect over 10.5 points tonight. But I'll tell you what I like even more. I like Lakers money line. Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal are both returning today. What will they look like? Will they be on a minutes restriction? We have no idea. But you can get the Lakers money line at plus value, sitting at plus 110. I think that the Lakers win this game. I don't think the Lakers drop twice to the Phoenix Suns. I think the Lakers find a way to win this game. Remember, they beat them earlier in the season. I think the Lakers will be up on the series at 2-1. I got the Lakers beating the Phoenix Suns tonight. If you guys could do us a huge favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you never miss when we go live or upload content. I also want all of y'all to have a happy Thanksgiving. We want to thank you guys so much for supporting us and making us a part of your daily morning routine. Enjoy lots of turkey, enjoy lots of stuff, and a lot of macaroni and cheese. Enjoy time with family, loved ones and friends. We appreciate y'all. We'll be back tomorrow, not for the morning show because we never do morning shows on Wednesdays, but we will be back for State of the Jungle at 7 p.m. where me and the guys will be discussing the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. And we'll be breaking down our keys to victory. We appreciate y'all so much. Remember, there's only one way you should be waking up, talking sports, having the conversation, and diving into all the action, and that is the right way. See ya tomorrow.